Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. As often seems to be the case with Microsoft Flight Simulator, we seem to go quite some time occasionally waiting for an add-on to release, and then we get a multitude of add-ons released all at once. That seems to be the case again. We've just had the PMDG 800, we've now got the Carenado PC-12. The PC-12 is of course the focus of our video today, and we're going to be taking a full review look at the aircraft. I've got quite a fun outing for us planned today in the PC-12. We are going to be doing a spot of Japanese island hopping. We're currently on the ground at Kerama Airport, and we're going to be taking the aircraft up north towards Suwanosejima. And apologies there of course if I've completely butchered the pronunciation. It should make for an interesting flight though, a good test I think as well of the PC-12. Both airports are handcrafted, so we should see some beautiful scenery hopefully en route. As usual, we'll take a look at the aircraft before we depart here. We'll cover off some areas that we won't see during the flight. We're then going to be carrying out a full flight, including a full cold and dark start, to get a feel for the aircraft system's fidelity, handling. We'll see whether or not Carenado's PC-12 performs to the numbers, get a feel for how she flies, how she looks, and of course how she sounds. As always, I do hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. As I mentioned just a moment ago, we'll kick this review off by first taking a look at a couple of areas of the aircraft that we aren't going to see during the flight itself. As ever, Carenado have made an absolutely superb effort at recreating the PC-12 visually. The add-on is an absolutely sterling example, as ever, of both modelling and texturing within the sim. And being a native Carenado aircraft as well, we do get all of the usual fixtures and fittings, which is nice to see. Namely there we get engine intake and exhaust covers, we get an external power supply, we can also get a tow bar, as well as some traffic cones and chocks. And further to that, both the front passenger entrance and the rear cargo door operate as they should. The passenger cabin modelling, every bit as nice as the rest of the aircraft, a really nice level of attention to detail. We also have folding tray tables, as well as operable window visors. So some nice little attentions to detail there, and as ever with Carenado, you really can't complain when it comes to the visuals of the aircraft. The same is very much true of the PC-12's cockpit. Obviously we're going to get a pretty good opportunity to take a look at that throughout the flight, but I think it's worth mentioning it's absolutely up to Carenado's standards, and I would say actually one of their best efforts in the sim that I've seen so far. Texturing is immaculate, very crisp, and all of the gauges as well, very clear, very easy to read. As I say, we'll obviously be covering that quite a bit throughout our flight. We also get the usual Carenado tablet included with the aircraft. Here we have the ability to add or remove the static elements, as well as the external power and the tow bar. We can also add or remove both the pilot and the co-pilot, both of which now use the default Asobo models. And as we've already seen, both the passenger door and the cargo door are operable. We do also have the ability to set the aircraft in various states, so cold and dark, ready for taxi and ready for takeoff. We do also have basic checklists included here in the tablet, although they're not as comprehensive as the checklists included with the manual. The aircraft does also have a little bit of capacity for customization. We can swap out the default avionics for either the PMS GTN 750 or the TDS GTN XI. Both units are great and they really go to enhance the aircraft's overall capabilities. In today's video we're going to be using the TDS GTN XI. Worth making very clear from the get-go, both of these units are payware, at least in their full functionality state, so if you do want to use them, they don't come with the aircraft as standard. Lastly, just a quick look at the aircraft's night lighting, and we have a whole host of options there. We have both panel lighting, dome lighting, instrument lighting. We also have cabin lighting, which gives a very nice visual effect in the cockpit. You do get that burn through of the light from the back onto the instrument panel. And we also have a series of rheostats, so we can adjust the various lighting configurations in terms of intensity. Overall, I think the night lighting, as with the rest of the aircraft, looks very nice, very photorealistic, very authentic. So as I say, once again from Carenado, the aircraft is visually an absolutely top-notch product. Of course, as a developer, when it comes to their modelling and texturing, they generally have little to no issues. Generally speaking, it tends to be the systems or the flight model that let the aircraft down. I think that's what most of us are interested in here today, so we'll head for the left-hand seat. We'll get the aircraft started up. And as I say, we'll put the PC-12 through its paces. So, welcome to the cockpit of the Carenado PC-12. We're on the ground here in Kerama. We've got quite a few checks to work through here, so we'll crack on with those. First things first, the emergency fuel shutoff lever can go to open. Pre-flight inspection has been completed. Seats are adjusted and locked. Seatbelts are fastened. The battery 1 and 2 masters can go on. According to the checklist here, we're looking for a minimum of 24 volts. We're slightly down there. We'll accept the aircraft today. I've had the batteries on earlier just checking out the aircraft. External power not connected. Landing gear lever is down, 3 greens. Fuel contents, just cancelling the caution there. Showing about 3/4 of our full fuel capacity in each tank there. The tanks are balanced. We've got about 500 litres there in each main tank. Interestingly as well, having adjusted the fuel within the sim there, you can see the fuel used figure has changed. And we can actually reset that, which is nice to see. There's quite a bit of functionality on the aircraft overall. So fuel contents is checked. Fuel pumps are both on. According to the checklist, we should be able to audibly hear those. I can't notice any difference there with the fuel pumps running, which is actually slightly unusual for Carenado aircraft. Usually the fuel pumps are one of the loudest features. Anyway, oxygen lever is on, and the oxygen gauge that's just behind us is checked. Pilot ventilation window, I presume is the window down here on our left. Interestingly, actually not modelled. You can't open that, it seems, in the sim, which is a little bit unusual for Carenado. External lights will set as required, so we'll take the nav lights on, and we'll get the beacon on. We're going to be starting the engine fairly shortly. The engine start then, once again the fuel quantity is checked and has been reset. Engine instrument system we can test. And once again, quite a bit of functionality, really good to see. So we'll let the system there run through the test. And the test is complete. We're also supposed to carry out a fire and a lamp test. Unfortunately, those switches are inoperative in the aircraft. Prop area is clear. So pretty simple for the startup. We just hit the starter engage. That can go on. And you can see there the engine's spooling up. We have rotation on the NG. We're looking for between 13 and 20%. Above 13 now, so the condition lever can go to ground idle. Really nice as well, the condition lever is actually gated there, so it does move into the correct positions. I've had a couple of Carenado aircraft in the past where there is no gate and you're left guessing somewhat. So for the ITT, we're looking for a maximum of 1000 degrees for 5 seconds. Thereafter, a maximum of 800 degrees. And looks like we're going to be topping out there around 760 degrees, so staying within limits, which is great. And we'll wait until we see the NG up above 50%, which we have, showing 62.1. And just waiting there for the engine to stabilise. So overall, I would say they're quite a nice startup sequence, and so far really liking the engine sounds as well. You can see the RPM still just ticking up there. So engine instruments, showing about 4 psi there on the torque, 757 on the ITT, 62% on the NG. Just coming up on 1000 RPM. Fuel totalizer has been reset, you can see that's now ticking up. Generator switches can go on. Looking at the ammeters there, interestingly it says not above 15 amps for departure, but we'll leave that for now, we'll see how we go. Avionics bus, both 1 and 2 can go on. And you can see even more of a draw now there on the generators. Standby bus switch is off. Radios and avionics set as required, so we'll just wait here for the GTNXI to initialize. Working our way there through the menus and waiting for the TORS test to complete.
TORS system test OK.
Okay, we'll clear our messages. And we'll build up our flight plan. So departing out of Kerama, Romeo, Oscar, Kilo, Romeo. We're then going to be tracking out towards the Yankee, Romeo, Echo VOR. After that, it'll be the Tango Kilo Echo VOR. And thereafter, we're going to be heading inbound towards Romeo Juliet X-Ray 8. And I actually had to create a user waypoint for the airfield there. So the route's in, we'll go back to the map display for now. Initial departure track 054, so we can set that on the course bar. There's 054, and for the heading bug, going to be departing off runway 20. She just gone the long way around there. We'll refine our heading bug once we get out to the runway, but we've got 20 set there. And lastly, for the CDI, we want the GPS navigation, which we now have. We've got our multifunction display down here. We'll talk about that, I think, during the flight. We'll leave that as is for now. So radios and avionics are set. We'll just set up the autopilot as well. We're going to be cruising our way up north at 15,000 feet. Altimeters, good. We've got a QNH of 1008 on both sides, and same there on the standby altimeter. And lastly, for the HSI then, showing a heading of about 170, same on the right, and 170 on the compass. ECS switch is set to auto. Temperature setting is good. Inertial separator is open. The before taxi checks then, the AHRS 1 and 2 are both checked, no flags. Flaps can go to 15. And indicating flaps 15. Autopilot will test. You can see there we do get the appropriate warnings there as well, so again, really nice to see. Test is complete. Pilot ventilation window, once again, unfortunately inoperable, but it is closed and locked. External lights. So we'll take the taxi lights on, and the recognition lights can go on there as well. Parking brake is off, and we can make our way out now towards the runway. So you can see we've got a pretty stiff headwind here down the southerly runway. And fairly tight manoeuvring area here on the apron with the Baron there parked up. So we'll just make our way out to the holding point, then we'll run through our before takeoff checks. We'll keep a good visual separation here on the Baron. So far though, I have to say, really impressed with the PC-12, really liking what I've seen. Okay, no real considerations in terms of engine today, so we'll just park without the headwind there. Park brake can go on. The before takeoff checks, power setting, couldn't find any info there in the Carenado manuals, but the max cruise power setting we're looking at today is 36.6 psi, so we'll go for around 37 for the takeoff. On the torque, that looks like that should be within limits. Fuel quantity, once again, is checked. Friction lock has been adjusted. Engine instruments are checked, and again, really nice to see everything looks to be within reasonable limits there. In the past we've seen with Carenado aircraft that isn't always the case. Flight instruments are checked. Trims are all set there within limits. Flaps, we have flaps 15 indicated and selected. Flight controls, full up, full down and neutral. Full left, full right and neutral, and on the rudder, full left, full right and neutral. So flight controls are full and free. The cause panel, just the AOA de-ice there, we'll be taking the de-ice probes on for the next step of the checklist. So probes can go on. The windshield heats there as well, we'll take those on. We'll just go to light for now, I'm not anticipating much in the way of any icing today. And again, you can see the caution is now extinguished. Radios and avionics are set, de-ice probes are on, windshield heat again is set. External lights, so getting ready to line up now on the runway, we'll take the strobes on and the landing lights on. DC amps are checked. Batteries don't seem to be charging up there at the moment. Again, we do have the generators on there. Keep an eye on that as we go. Transponder can go to out. And we have out squawking 1200. Condition lever can go to flight idle. And again there you can see with the condition lever in flight idle the NG coming up. Torque stabilising. Again, really nice sounds as well. So condition lever is set to flight idle. Inertial separator is set to open. And we'll now get ourselves taxied into position here on the runway. Okay, so we're all set and ready to go here on runway 20. You can see there's actually a little bit of a shower just passing through the area. In terms of our departure routing though, everything looking pretty clear. Running through the last of our before takeoff checks then for the EHSI, showing a heading there of about 200 degrees. And same there on the right, so that concurs with the runway heading. Interestingly though, the compass there showing 180 degrees, so that's a pretty significant discrepancy. Given the runway heading and also cross-checking there against the GTNXI, I would say that's definitely the compass there that's an error, so that needs a little bit of work. Similarly, if we come down to the caution and warning panel, we've now got an essential bus and avionics bus warning. And looking up at the batteries there, continuing to discharge currently. I've tried various configurations there, I've tried using key binds as well. We definitely got the generators on, but it looks as though the system is still discharging. We're going to chance it though, we'll hope we've got enough voltage there to make it over towards destination. So lastly, ECS can go off, park brake can come off. Just hold the aircraft on the brakes as we come up to our takeoff power setting. Looks like that range just cleared through. Again, I couldn't find any documentation for a takeoff power setting provided by Carenado, but you can actually find the real-world PC-12 manual online. That gave us a takeoff torque setting of 38 psi. So we're going to use that, although we'll probably get an ITT caution as a result. We'll disregard that for the takeoff today. We'll be going through the amber band through 800 degrees. I'm not sure whether or not that's accurate with the real-world PC-12 during the takeoff. I suspect not. But otherwise, we're never going to get off the ground here at Kerama. So power is set. You can see we're just about to nudge up through 800 degrees, so we'll cancel the caution. Off the brakes. The nose definitely wants to pull out to the left, but it's actually pretty easy to correct with rudder. The rudder feels pretty good in the PC-12 overall. We've got about half deflection currently, and obviously just easing off on that as the speed builds. Just come up through 90 knots, so easing back on the yoke. And we're airborne, climbing away, tap the brakes, the gear can come up. Getting a little bit bashed around here as we come over the ridge line off the departure end of the runway. Up through 500 feet, speed is checked, the flaps can come up. And we'll begin our turn out towards the northeast. Again, just a little bit of weather off the nose, just a band of showers. Maintain around 120 knots for now, just until we finish the turn and gain a little bit more altitude. So landing gear is up, lights out, flaps are up. You can see looking at the sea state there, we've got a fair old wind today out of Kerama. So far the aircraft pretty nice to fly. It felt good on the rudder, as I said, during the takeoff. Pretty good as well in roll. Very heavy in pitch actually. I've got almost full back deflection here to keep the aircraft climbing, so we'll start trimming out some of those control forces. And just coming onto our planned course 054, so getting ready to roll wings level. Coming up through 2,000 feet. Again, the weather looking pretty reasonable here on our departure track. And we've got a pretty nice tailwind there, showing about 35 knots off the tail at the moment. So we'll lower the nose a little here. The ITT looking pretty good now, so we'll maintain 35 psi on the torque for the time being. Pitch down, get the speed up to around 180 knots for the climb. So just leaving Kerama behind us. And getting a few bumps here, presumably as we come over the terrain just down below. Your damper can go in. We'll centre up the heading bug. We'll get the flight director on as well. We'll go into heading. We'll just leave off on IS hold just a moment longer here, just again building up a little bit more speed. Go for 500 feet permanent rate of climb until we get up to 180 knots. And looking good there now on the speed, so we're going to IS hold. So we'll engage the autopilot. I've had a few issues with the autopilot, I have to say. Sometimes it goes a little bit haywire when you engage. Looks like it's going to capture okay this time. I've had it where it flies through 360 degrees to actually capture the heading, which is obviously no good, and as a result it tends to go into a bit of a dive there as well. Anyway, running through the after takeoff checks then. Landing gear is up, lights are out, flaps are up, indicating up. Taxi light is off, external lights are set as required. Your damper is on. Weather radar, again, we'll discuss any functionality there later on during the flight.
Departure Japan 157. On 45 of Java at the Lima 15 last number 169. On 4646 at the Lima 4, cross runway 169. Cross runway 169 at the Lima 4, 4646.
Okay, so we're just approaching 15,000 feet, staying on the QNH for our flight today. Just waiting to see whether or not the autopilot captures that. Looks like we are going to capture quite nicely there. I've had, again, hit and miss results, but so far today the autopilot seems to be working pretty well. So levelling us off at 15,000. As per the Carenado manual, 36.6 psi on the torque is our maximum cruise power setting today. I thought we'd get up north as quickly as we can. That's giving us an ITT of 765 degrees. Fuel flow about 450 pounds an hour, which seems pretty accurate. The documentation said about 235 kilograms per hour. And the aircraft also quite nicely there gives us our endurance, showing about 3.5 hours of flight time in terms of fuel on board. The autopilot's also been tracking quite nicely in nav here as well. We just turned overhead the Yankee Romeo Echo VOR, now tracking inbound towards Tango Kilo Echo. We'll switch over there on the VORs. We've got Tango Kilo Echo identified. Currently doesn't look like that's reading correctly there on the RMI. Again, still got 35 knots of tailwind here. That's giving us ground speed, nearly 300 knots, so we're really hacking along here at 15,000 feet. Looks like the autopilot didn't quite capture there. Again, it's done the classic Asobo 100 feet above your selected altitude. We'll monitor that for now. We'll just leave the aircraft as is. So running through our cruise checks, altimeters are set. Again, we're going to stay on the QNH. HRS is checked. Cabin pressurization is checked. Engine instruments are checked. Ice protection systems are set as required, and that's the cruise checklist complete. So just coming back to our flight plan briefly, showing about another 145 miles to run. It's only about another half an hour here in the cruise. As I said, I thought while we're in the cruise here it'd be a good opportunity to look at the multifunction display. So we'll head down to that and we'll run through briefly the functionality that we have available to us there. So coming down to the Avionics multifunction display then, firstly of course we have the power button. We can use that to turn the unit on or off. The brightness button adjusts whether or not we have a daytime or nighttime setting. We'll leave that on fully bright for now. The left hand scroll functionality allows us to work our way through the various menus, and the right hand scroll wheel allows us to zoom in and out on the map range. Press any bezel key to continue, so we'll do exactly that. You can see we're currently on the map, pretty typical there of what you'd expect from the sim, a fairly reasonably nicely modelled there map display. We can toggle traffic on and off, we can centre up the view, we can declutter to various degrees on the map. We can also choose whether or not to display terrain. And lastly, we can choose whether or not to display any weather. You can see we do have those sort of light bands of cloud around us currently that we've been passing through. As I say, the outer bezel there changes the range on the map. And using the right hand bezel we can toggle our way through, so we have tours, which again is essentially a terrain display. Trip, which is a nice little feature here. You can actually program your trip into the sim and it'll give you information much like we saw on the Garmin GTN XI above, so it'll give you your waypoints as you can see, your bearings, your times, as well as whether or not the aircraft's on course. Currently showing 307 knots over the ground, tracking 022, and we have both our local and our UTC time. Info as well, when it works, is quite nice. Info actually allows you to see your airfields that you've got planned for the trip. Unfortunately though, as we haven't planned anything in here for the flight today, we can't see that, but otherwise we'd be able to look at, for example, the airfield data at Kerama. Nearest, so that gives us our nearest available airfields, and here we can get a good example of airport info. So if we look at Romeo Juliet Kilo November, and there you can see it gives us basic information. So it's a north-south runway, aerodrome elevation of 5 feet, and it gives you the frequencies there as well. So again, pretty nice functionality I would say for a essentially fairly default piece of avionics. Auxiliary gives us a load of information that you're probably not really going to be using in the sim, but it allows you to select various filters. Same goes with the declutter there. We can choose to what degree we declutter the display, but quite a bit of customization as you can see. Data blocks, I'm not entirely sure what this refers to there, but it is an option. And lastly we have system time, so again you can select UTC, your current time zone by the looks of things. And lastly radar, again much as you would expect there, we have a weather radar display, currently using of course the default Asobo weather display there, so again just picking up some light returns from the various showers en route. So not necessarily a study level rendition of the avionics unit there, but I think some really nice functionality. It certainly goes above and beyond what you'd typically see in a default aircraft. So as I say, I think overall not a bad effort there from Carenado.
Japan 121 Tokyo Land 16 Delta Alpha 14 Dynamic Runway, expect departure after the arrival 5 miles for runway 23.
So we're still cracking along quite nicely here at the moment. We have another island just passing off the right wing. Still doing 300 knots over the ground, so about 5 miles a minute, and we're going to be looking to descend in just a moment's time. 15,000 feet, aiming to descend at 1,000 feet per minute, so we need about 15 minutes here for the descent. And just come through 75 nautical miles, so as I say, now is a good time to start the descent. We'll descend initially down to 3,000 feet. We can refine things once we're in the traffic pattern. So we'll arm that up, we'll come into vertical speed. As I say, looking for 1,000 feet per minute. And the aircraft descending there, maintaining our vertical speed as required. So again, overall the autopilot doing a pretty nice job thus far. We'll keep a good eye on our airspeed here as well. That's obviously going to build as we descend. But we'll try and take the extra speed here as we make our approach in towards destination. Running through our descent checks then, the ice protection systems are set as required. Power control lever is set, cabin pressurization system is set, and the windshield heat. Again, we'll leave those on for now, they're set. That's the descent checklist complete. So again, picking up a few extra knots, now doing 320 knots over the ground. Planning to just continue straight inbound towards destination for now, and we'll break off into the circuit. Interestingly, as a result of actually creating a user waypoint here for Romeo Juliet X-Ray 8, it means we don't have any information available for the airfield itself. And so actually here the Avionics unit comes into its own. We can actually come down to the nearest page, and we can scroll our way through to Romeo Juliet X-Ray 8, which is Suwanosejima. And we can go to airport info there. Again, just keeping an eye on our speed. So you can see we have a northwest southeasterly runway. That's the only information we get really. 100 feet aerodrome elevation, so we'll come into the circuit at around 1600 feet for the flight today. We know the wind's out from the south, so we'll aim to land out towards the southeast. That's going to give us probably quite a significant crosswind today, so it'll be interesting to see how we get on there in terms of the aircraft's handling. We'll come back onto the weather radar for the time being. Speed's still looking good. QNH is checked. We've got 1008. Again, we stayed on QNH throughout the flight. And just coming up on about 60 miles to run now towards destination. So far we've burned our way through 460 pounds of fuel. Still showing about 3 hours endurance on the aircraft.
On Spotify 110 kilo.
Okay, so we are just coming back through the clouds, just passing through 5,500 feet, so another 1,500 feet to go here in the descent. And again, we'll just come slightly back off the power here, just keeping that speed in check. Just passing through the cloud very briefly there, we won't bother with the anti-ice systems, but running through the approach checks. Ice protection systems are set as required. Altimeters, we have QNH 1008 set on both sides. Fuel quantities, we have about half our fuel capacity now on board, and showing an endurance there of 2 hours 48 minutes, so plenty of fuel for any go-around options or diversion if we need it. Landing gear will hold for now, we can take that down below a speed of 177 knots. Landing lights are on. Recognition lights will take on here as well. So external lights are set as required, and just as a reminder for myself later on, flap limit speeds 15 degrees, we're looking for a maximum of 163 knots, and full flaps a maximum of 130 knots. Passenger briefing is complete. Inertial separator is set to open. We are landing on a prepared surface, but it's a pretty basic strip we've got in at Suwanosejima, so we'll plan on there potentially being dirt and debris on the runway. So coming up from 4,000 feet, the aircraft should level us off momentarily. Again, we'll just see how the aircraft copes there in terms of capturing the altitude. Showing 10 miles to run now inbound, and you can see the island there just buried away behind that cloud off the nose. So the approach checklist is complete, just waiting now to run the landing checklist. There's 1,000 to go. So currently coming in from the south, again we're looking for the southwesterly runway, so pretty much coming back on a reciprocal heading here, if the Avionics unit's to be believed. We'll get the aircraft slowed up once we've levelled off here, and then we'll make an approach over the runway, make sure everything's clear, and assess which direction we want to come in from. We should capture 3,000 feet momentarily. Okay, interestingly there, it doesn't look like the aircraft is going to capture. To be fair though, we didn't have arm there, so that may well have been the case. A little bit tricky though, I've been finding sometimes it will arm, sometimes it won't, and again that may be a misunderstanding on my part, but I think there are a few gremlins with the autopilot for sure. So rolling off the power, maintaining 3,000 feet for now. As I say, we'll overfly the runway at 3,000, we can descend once we're happy with where we want to be. So reducing that torque, we'll aim to come back to around 150 knots. We can take a stage of flap. You can see there's a little port just down on the northwesterly edge of the island there. The runway should be just off to the east of that. So you can just make out the runway. So I think what we'll actually do here, we'll fly past the runway, make sure everything's clear, and then we'll do a quick lap around the island for the approach. Should be quite scenic. That'll give us time to get slowed down and configured. So there's a runway, you can see tiny parking area, pretty small strip. As I said, it is a hardened surface, but doesn't look like any significant maintenance would take place there, so we'll stick with the inertial separator. So just coming around the westerly edge of the island, you can see the little port there that we mentioned inbound towards the airfield. Just coming visual with the runway, so we'll take full flaps. And we'll look to maintain around 100 knots for now down final approach. For the landing checks, landing gear is down 3 greens, flaps 40 indicated. Speed is checked, autopilot and yaw damper are disengaged. The landing check was complete. Just inhibited the TORs there as well on the GTNX side, just to avoid any spurious warnings since the airfield isn't in the database.
500.
Let's check 500. Getting a little bit bumped around again as we come over the hills. All the way back at idle power currently, getting what feels like some lift here off the hills. Probably going to get some sink in a moment as we come over the top of the hill here. Going to land a little bit long just to clear the trees, so we'll go full beta once we touch down. Just nudging up against the stall warning there. Landing quite long. Let's touch down. We'll go full beta. Just vacating off to the right. We'll go and park up and then we'll run through the after landing and the shutdown checks. And again, a pretty tight manoeuvring area here. So we'll just keep a good eye on our wingtip clearance. Pretty marginal currently. So we'll just swing ourselves around. Using a little bit of brake here as well to tighten up the turn. Still clear there of the Bonanza. So onto the brakes, park brake can go on. Running through the after landing checks, power control lever is set to idle. Condition lever can go to ground idle. Flaps can come up. External lights. Get the landing lights off, strobes off and recognition lights off. De-icing systems. We can get the windshield heats off, inertial separator can go off, probe heats can come off. And just cancelling the caution there. Transponder is set to standby. Weather radar is off. For the shutdown then, power control lever is in the idle detent. Parking brake is set. ECS switch is off. External lights are set. De-icing is set. Cooling and heating systems are set. Passenger signs are off. Standby bus switch is on. Avionics 1 and 2 masters are both off. Generator 1 and 2 switches are both off. And the condition lever can come back now to the cut-off feather position. So, good rundown there on the engine. We'll cancel the caution. Oxygen lever is off. Light switches. Just take the beacon off. On the caution and warning display, we'll just run through what we have there. So we've still got that essential bus warning. Gen 1 and Gen 2 off as we would expect. Same for the fuel pressure and the AOA de-ice. Prop just winding down. We'll wait for that to stop. And both the battery 1. Actually, just before we turn the batteries off there, so showing 21 volts is what we ultimately arrived with there on the batteries. Battery 1 master can go off. And the same there for battery 2. So there you go, ladies and gents. I do hope you enjoyed our outing in the Carenado PC-12. I have to say, overall I started off with a very strong impression of the aircraft. Unfortunately, it slowly went down from there. I think for the money it's still a potentially nice product, but it does have a couple of flaws that I think need sorting out. Touching on the electrical issue first, as I think that's probably the most important thing I saw here today. Worth noting that I did try the aircraft thereafter, ready for takeoff and on the runway, and it seems that if the aircraft is set up, ready to go, there's no issues with the electrical system. I suspect the same may well be true if we'd use Control E for the start, but currently it seems as though some of the switches aren't quite working behind the scenes. We've seen that before on other Carenado aircraft, and we've also seen it from other developers. I presume the fix won't be too difficult, so hopefully we'll see that affected in fairly short order. Again, I'm also very happy to hold my hands up there and say that it could be user error, but I followed the checklist pretty thoroughly there, and as I say, I did try a multitude of configurations, and nothing seemed to actually fix the issue. That being said, we didn't actually lose the electrical system itself at any point. It just seemed that the battery was draining down very slowly, so unless you are flying for a particularly extended period of time, hopefully the issue shouldn't cause you too many problems in the sim. Anyway, I thought I'd just cover that one off before I give you my overall debrief on the product. As usual, we'll just run through a few positives and negatives regarding the PC-12. So the main issues I find currently, again the electrical system, assuming that that isn't an error on my part, I think currently needs some work. The flight model was a mixed bag. It does definitely have a more unique feel to it than many of the other Carenado add-ons that I've tried. It didn't feel particularly generic. As I say, rudder response on the takeoff felt pretty good, same on the landing. Roll response felt decent as well, except at the extremes there, trying to get the aircraft down at destination. I was having to use full aileron deflection. The aircraft was very slow to respond there and actually almost uncorrectable at certain points. And in pitch, the aircraft felt pretty heavy at times, certainly during rotation and the initial stages of the climb. Easy enough to trim out though, but the aircraft was a little bit pitchy throughout the flight, I found. So again, the flight model did feel like it received more attention than usual, but I can't say that I necessarily enjoyed hand flying the PC-12 all that much. My last negative for the product would be the frame rates. I found that the PC-12 was a real frame hog, probably one of, if not the worst that I've seen in the sim to date. I tried the aircraft with various avionics configurations as well, just to be fair, but to give you an example, I was getting about 41 FPS in the PC-12. Under the same scenario with the default Cessna 152, I was getting about 83 frames per second, so losing about 42 frames overall, and the aircraft actually cutting my sim's FPS more or less in half. Again, I'm not sure that I've actually seen any other add-on in the sim have quite such an impact on the frame rate, so I would suggest that a little bit of work needs to be done there to optimise the aircraft a little bit more. Again, it is a very beautiful visual model, but usually Carenado aircraft, despite that, are still pretty frame rate friendly. Anyway, those were my major negatives with the product. In terms of positives, as usual, visual modelling and texturing absolutely excellent, pretty much second to none. The flight model, as I say, I think it does have one or two issues, but again it does have a unique feeling to it. And overall the PC-12, as I said, not the most fun aircraft to hand fly in the sim, but nevertheless an enjoyable aircraft to operate. It's nice as well to have an aircraft that's very capable of getting in and out of pretty short unprepared strips, but also having a very high cruise speed and excellent performance. Systems fidelity, again with the exception of the electrical issues, was actually a very pleasant surprise overall. The aircraft did have, as you'll have seen, quite a bit of depth to it, certainly more than I was expecting. And to me at least, it did feel just a cut above Carenado's usual output when it came to the system's fidelity. PC-12 also seemed to perform reasonably close to the numbers, at least when it came to things like the fuel burn. We discussed the ITT there during the takeoff. I'm not sure whether or not that's accurate to the real-world aircraft, but if you're familiar with the PC-12, I'm sure that you will be. The sounds I certainly thought were a very pleasant surprise as well. I've never sat in a PC-12 myself, but they certainly held up and they felt the part. There seemed to be a nice separation there as well between the engine noise and the prop noise, which a lot of aircraft in the sim don't generally get right. As I mentioned recently with another Carenado review, I tend to find that Carenado do either a very good job with the sounds or a very average one. Here I felt with the PC-12 we were much closer to the very good end of the spectrum, and as I say, I thought the sounds held up very well. They certainly made for a very immersive cockpit environment, and I felt as well that the aircraft provided quite a bit of feedback in terms of the sounds it used. I think my last positive, the avionics options, really great to see that Carenado have finally also taken up the TDS GTN-XI. That's actually my preferred unit in the sim. I really like the functionality. I feel it adds a lot to an aircraft, so it's great to see it finally being taken on board. Hopefully as well we'll maybe see Carenado add the functionality to their previous lineup with an update at some point in the future. Anyway, I think that just about runs through our debrief of the Carenado PC-12. For me, I think the aircraft is one of Carenado's more accomplished efforts in the sim to date, and goes to demonstrate, at least to me, that as a developer they are progressing in terms of what they're offering in the sim. It seems we did still find a few scrappy bugs here and there. I think that's to be expected at this point, but at least the system's depth was more than I was expecting. And overall, I do think you have to say, especially given the price, that the PC-12 is a pretty nice and rounded product. Anyway guys, once again I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. If you'd like to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. If you're watching this video and you're a little bit bored, you've still got some time to kill, then please consider as well going and watching my PMDG 737-800 video. I spent an awful long time on that one, plugging away, trying to get the video as realistic and immersive as I could. Lastly, as always, a very big thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. It is thoroughly appreciated. I do hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.